Hello and welcome to another episode of Two Guys and a Chainsaw. I'm Todd.
And I'm Craig.
It's our werewolf cycle here on Two Guys and a Chainsaw. We kicked it off with American Werewolf in London and The Howling, two comedic, campier werewolf outings, like most of what I imagined we would be doing. And then I was clued into this third film, which was also released in 1981, the same year the other two were released. It did not do as well as the others, probably because it's definitely more of an artsy, thoughtful film than your campy horror movie, which apparently was not what the distributors wanted. They wanted something a little more just campy and horror. It is based on a 1978 novel called The Wolfen by Whitley Streiber. And I've brought up Whitley Streiber on our podcast before, back when we talked about the Alien Encounter movie that we did, the found footage movie of the family invaded by aliens.
Okay.
I think it was during that movie because Whitley Streiber wrote, it's supposed to be nonfiction, called Communion, and has since become, he claims he doesn't know what has been visiting him and he's been having these encounters with. He stops short of calling it extraterrestrial. He thinks that's jumping to conclusions. But he wrote two very popular nonfiction books called Communion and Transformation in 1986 and 1989, I think. I read both of them. I was utterly fascinated with them. And his descriptions of the people who visited him were sort of the basis of where we get that modern conception. Oh, that's why I talked about it in that podcast, because that conception of the alien with the big oval head and those black eyes is sort of originated by him. But before he wrote those books, he wrote a couple novels that were turned into movies. The Wolfen, which is this one, and The Hunger, which is a vampire movie, which we might end up doing at some point. I think Susan Sarandon, David Bowie, they're both in it.
Yeah.
This one definitely takes a different tact. This is a very sort of like, it's very much like an allegory for what are we doing to the earth, the ecology. You know, I was getting a little bit of like Deliverance-ish vibes, especially in the beginning. Deliverance in the beginning of that film takes great pains to set up this metaphor that I think it's doing, where it's showing lots of city development and destruction of the rural landscape and of plowing down forests and things for progress. And, you know, just that imagery at the beginning, you know, really sets up that tone. And I felt like this movie, I didn't actually end up taking a lot of notes on this movie because I watched the first 15 minutes, sat down, was really taking notes on it. And then I couldn't watch anymore because I had to go to sleep. And then the rest of it I watched in one big swell and didn't take any notes. But like, I've got like a list. Guys with headbands and a bird on top of the historic bridge in a big city, building demolition, rich people snorting coke in the back of a limo, but hippies are throwing a bottle at them and then running along the support cable of a bridge. It's just all of these like crazy scenes all kind of slammed at you together, which betrays the fact that it was directed by a documentary filmmaker, Michael Wadley, and apparently he was taken off the project in post-production because the first cut that he submitted was over 4 hours long.
Right.
So he still was credited as the director, but this was heavily edited by Raymond Chu, who's an award-winning, Academy Award-winning editor, did Star Wars and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest and a bunch of big famous films. Anyway, also starring Albert Finney. Oh my God. I just couldn't watch this movie and not think Daddy Warbucks the whole time.
Oh, God. I didn't even go that far back. Like, obviously I recognized him because he's just that old guy in everything.
Right.
And has been that old guy in everything forever. Alan walked through as I was watching it, and it was the part where he was walking up on the bridge, and he said, did he ask Aaron Brockovich if he could go up on that bridge?
Oh, yeah. That's right.
He's been in a bazillion things. And it was weird to see him in this movie because I guess I kind of just have always, my whole life, as far as I remember, thought of him as that old man and stuff. And in this, I feel like he's supposed to be sexy.
I don't know.
No. He's not.
I felt he was supposed to be almost a little washed up because he's like retired, right? He's like retired with the police force, but he's kind of pulled out of retirement for this. I think I saw a quote by him once that's claimed that, he said that like he sees himself in these movies and he's asked to play these parts that are way older than he really is. I mean, he just kind of always has had that old look and he's been cast for it, a lot of times. Like, well, I can't remember what other famous role he had when he was like in his late 30s and he was playing like a 50-something-year-old guy.
I don't know. Like, and it's not like he's an unattractive person. Like he's a good looking guy. He's just not. I feel like this is, I don't know, any leading man, the Brad Pitt role or what, like he's supposed to, he's the lead guy. So today he would probably be played by somebody a little bit more handsome. I don't know. I'm digging myself into a hole. Get me out of it. But, Albert Finney, he's been in a ton of stuff and he's great. And he's the lead in this movie and he plays this guy named Dewey Wilson who they bring in. Like, okay, you already kind of covered that first part where like it opens up on a shot of the Twin Towers. That will forever be eerie to me. Every time I see one of these old movies that heavily, and it's so often heavily features the Twin Towers. It's gives me the heebie-jeebies. But you left out some important things, like a Native American on top of a bridge swinging around one of those Crocodile Dundee things.
Yeah.
Oh boy. I was like, what is happening? Right. Then the slums, buildings being demolished. You're right. It's setting a scene because this is going to be a very, very important thing. But there's also prominently this church. Now, what I read is like this whole devastated area was just real somewhere in
the Bronx.
Yeah, the Bronx, right.
Yeah.
But they built that church and destroyed it afterwards, like burned it or whatever. But it looks cool. Like it's like this big kind of decrepit church, like the ceiling's all fallen in. It's mostly just like the frame, but it still is obviously a church. And that's an important location too. And at this point, we get our first instance of wolf vision. Yeah.
It's so interesting that we have covered just within the last month Predator, right? Because Predator is kind of known for that wolf, that predator vision. And that was what 87, 86? This is 81, and this is recorded as the first instance of that technique being used in a movie.
I read that and I wondered if it was true, because if it's true, that's pretty cool, because bazillions of movies have used it since as POV shot of alien or monster or
animals or something.
Yeah, right. It feels like it came earlier. It's a little more rough, I guess, as far as a special effect is concerned. But
yeah, it's not as colorful. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Okay. Let's just leave it at that. But it's that concept. And then there's like a helicopter flying around. And you talked about there's this wealthy couple like snorting coke in a limousine. One of the Native Americans from the bridge throws a bottle at them. I'm like, what is happening? Like, well, this movie was weird. Like, I get.
You didn't see this as setting up this whole the progress.
Why would I think that?
Because it's
why would I be like, this is going to be a movie about like Native Americans and gentrification? Like, no, it's just some random guy on a bridge throwing shit at a limo.
There's nothing random.
I don't have any idea who they are.
There's nothing random when a person cuts together a movie. They do it for a purpose. I'm instantly looking for the purpose, and I thought, I mean, if it wasn't so weird and so out there as a Native American guy on the top, doing his thing and on the top of this bridge overlooking the modern city, which is sort of tropey, right?
Yes.
Then it's this wealthy couple snorting coke, and then they're throwing a bottle at him. I mean,
but the guy like scurries down the bridge like a spider monkey.
Yeah.
Just to throw a bottle of beer or something.
That's weird.
People, again, I just didn't know what was going on. And it took a while. Like, they set up this whole thing. There's this couple. All we know about them is that they're wealthy and debaucherous. That's it. That's all we know.
Yeah.
And they go to Battery Park and they're walking around, and we see that a wolf, we presume, since the movie is called Wolfen, is watching them, and they have a driver, and the driver is just like hanging out in another part of the park or whatever. And cinematically, it's kind of cool. Like, there's really cool shots. and they take advantage of some cool set pieces. I don't know if those were actual things that were in the park that they just used. I kind of doubt it because they looked very fragile. It was like some kind of like weird ass windmill.
Yeah.
And they were playing, the wealthy couple was like playing around in or whatever. One of the things that bothers me about this movie is that this wolf vision, and I guess it's explainable, but I feel like it doesn't really get explained until the end. These wolves can apparently get right up within a couple of feet of people.
Yeah.
And they don't see them.
Right.
Now, are we to come? They're not. Oh, so many things to say. First of all, we were bamboozled because this is not a werewolf movie.
Correct.
It's not. It's not a werewolf movie.
It's a shapeshifters movie, but shapeshifting is werewolfism, really.
They talk about shape-shifting, but it really just seems like I'm not even. We're jumping to the end. Is that okay? I don't know.
I think we can.
I think we can because it doesn't really matter. And I was just so confused all along. I didn't understand what was happening. I was told, not by you even, by the internet, that I was watching a werewolf movie. And we had just watched those last two that had these great transformation moments. And I'm waiting and I'm waiting. I'm like, when are we going to get the great transformation moment? And I'm like, at least when are we going to get to see the werewolf? We're not. Because it's not a werewolf movie.
Yeah.
It's a movie about, I don't get it. Like, is it literally human Native American spirits that can shapeshift? Or is it just other beings who are like Native Americans in their lifestyles, but they predate us and they're just kind of still hanging around and surviving? I didn't get it.
I think that's open to interpretation, and the latter is maybe a little closer to home, but they share a kinship with Native Americans, and because the Native Americans are well aware of them.
Right.
And they call them the other peoples, right? The other tribes or whatever.
Something like that.
And I think this has its roots, and I did read this, I don't remember where, but this sort of has its roots, especially in the novel, which actually the novel kicks off apparently in the 17th century.
Yes.
The original Dutch explorers to the U.S. would refer to Native Americans and wolves using similar terminology, calling them the Wolfen, to kind of, it's a racist thing, I'm sure.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I mean, that was to intentionally dehumanize them, right?
Exactly.
Like, to equate them with animals.
Right.
I don't know. I feel like there's something really interesting there, and it doesn't really, it's suggested throughout, kind of, but there's a huge exposition dump in like the last 15 minutes.
Yeah, there is.
And I just kind of wish that they had placed that exposition dump earlier.
Yeah.
Because I was just confused as to what was going on. This is an odd movie, Todd. It's unlike the types of movies that we usually do, especially it was not at all being a werewolf movie, which it's not what I had anticipated.
Right.
This is much more like a drama. It's much more like one of those Italian movies that you would make me watch. Wouldn't you agree? Like it's far more interested in like intrigue,
yes,
than action.
And it is intense in that way. Some of the intensity maybe gets lost when you're just a little confused by it as well, right? But like, I think it's very brooding. I think it's very, you're not quite sure what it's about, but you just have a sense of unease. I felt a sense of unease through a lot of the movie. There were times in which I thought something important might be happening or something sinister was around the corner. And sometimes it seemed like that was true, and sometimes it seemed like it wasn't. It had very dreamlike qualities to it.
Yeah.
I felt a little bit like Possession in a way.
Yeah.
When we weren't sure exactly what we were watching, if it was real or if it wasn't. This is a little more grounded in reality than Possession, but also like a Kenneth, what's his name? Lair the White Worm was one of them.
I don't know.
Yeah, where he goes to these odd places and he's setting up a tone, like you said. Gothic was another one of his, right? Where he's setting up this thematic thing and you just kind of go along the ride. But I thought this had a very discernible and easy to follow plot. It has a pretty typical police procedural mystery murder plot as well. So I don't even think it was that ethereal.
No. The feeling that I was having was boredom. I shit you not. I literally had to stop in the middle and take a nap.
It's slow. It's one of those kinds of movies you got to be in the mood for.
I was falling asleep.
I could not imagine this at 4.5 hours. That would be
oh my God, no.
insane.
And then I got up and I went right back to it. I never even finished out that opening scene. And then they get attacked, but you don't really ever see anything. Like you see, that's not fair. You do see things, but you never see the assailant. We come to find out that these are, in fact, wolves, albeit supernatural wolves.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that they must also carry samurai swords because they can just slice off like, like that driver's hand just gets sliced off. I can't think of what would be sharp enough to do other than a samurai sword because it's just gone.
Hands and heads.
And they also do heads later.
Yeah.
It comes right up on him. Like it's literally feet away from him before the guy notices, but he eventually does notice, which makes me think they are visible.
Of course they are.
Okay, fine. Right. But the reason that I'm sighing is because we find out at the end that they can be invisible. They can disappear at will. So I'm wondering, do they like sneak up on them invisible and then right before they're about to attack turn visible?
I didn't catch the disappearing at will bit.
They disappear at the end.
From the apartment?
Yes, they disappear.
No, they don't
see them. Yes, you do. I watched this movie and I watched a wolf disappear. Like it faded away.
Oh, I did not notice that. I remembered the policeman shooting, and the guy was like, "Don't shoot it." And they cut to him shooting, and they cut to all the mirrors in the room, and the mirrors on the French blinds and all that. And then when they cut back, the wolves were gone, but the French blinds were still swaying. I thought they had just jumped back out and done it so quickly.
No, they disappeared.
Okay. I'll take your word for it.
I mean, I don't know. Now you have me questioning myself, but I was like, this was middle of the day. I was stone cold sober. I had just had a nap. So I had to have been clear. I don't know. I could have been hallucinating it, whatever. Anyway, I don't know. Like, that's the thing. I feel like we're hesitating to get into the plot because there's not a whole lot to talk about.
Well, I think there's a lot to talk about, but
okay. Well, then you lead it because I don't know. If I keep going, I will just keep trying to hit plot points, and I don't think that that's necessary.
No,
I do want to talk about how there are so many familiar faces in this, which is ironic because I read that he didn't want to cast well-known people.
Well, they weren't as well known at the time, except for, of course, Albert Finney.
Yeah, right. But the other people he wanted to cast lesser knowns. So he went to Broadway, which is where he got a couple of them, including Gregory Hines.
Yeah.
Who, God, I couldn't believe it. That got me. Like, I don't usually do this, but I pulled up the IMDb page for this and the, trailer started playing silently, on mute or whatever. Mm-hmm. And I was just, looking to see who directed it or whatever. And then all of a sudden there was teeny tiny baby Gregory Hines. I'm like, what? Yeah. So I watched the trailer. So I was excited to see that he was in it. And he got a couple of other people from like Broadway and then just people who, were new to the industry, like Tom Noonan.
Tom Noonan, baby. One of his first roles.
Oh, I know. Like, he was brand spanking new, and he's young, and he's handsome, and I was like, Tom Noonan, I know we've talked about him before.
Yeah.
And so I started looking at the stuff that he had done, and I was like, oh my God, he's Frankenstein from the Monster Squad.
The Monster Squad. But also, like, more recently in The House of the Devil, he was the guy there. The older guy.
And he was also the villain in another movie that we've talked about a bazillion times, The Last Action Hero.
Yeah.
And I had forgotten that was him. And I was thinking like Frankenstein in the Monster Squad. Now, he was in heavy makeup in that, but he still acted it It still looks like him, and he can still act, and like he really does. And oh my God, he just breaks my heart in that movie. And then in The Last Action Hero, he is a nasty, nasty villain.
He is.
So I like that guy. He's great. So, okay, I said I wanted to talk about it. I did. All these familiar faces pop up. And this is when they were lesser known. Oh my God. Edward James Olmos is the Native American guy on the bridge.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have even have recognized him.
You really wouldn't, would you? But Battlestar Galactica, both the original and the remake, and so many other things.
Oh, well, of course, I know him from that Teacher movie. I don't even remember what it was. I don't even remember the name of it, but he played like an amazing inspirational teacher in some movie. Oh God. Anyway, so yeah, so like all these amazing people just keep popping up like over and over and over again. The guy, oh God, we watched so many movies. Was it this movie that the guy from Inner Space was in? Maybe it was a different movie that we watched. I don't know. We've watched so many. Anyway.
Do you mean Dick O'Neill, who's been in like everything ever made?
Yes. And he was in Inner Space. It's another movie that he's just this, and he's barely in it. Like he's just, I don't know, like a boss in their business for a minute. Those were the things that kept me in it, because other than that, it was a little dry for me.
Yeah.
I didn't dislike it. I thought it was fine. It's just, we've been especially you have been talking about Werewolf Month for years. You have wanted to do Werewolf Month for years.
Right.
And I just kind of keep putting it off. And then we just kind of fell into it. And then I was watching this and I was like, this is a disappointment. I feel like we wasted a slot.
No, see, my whole thing about Werewolf Month is, like, if they're all just cheesy werewolf movies, it's not fun. I'm really looking for and hoping that we continue along the path of doing a variety of different takes on werewolves. And so I was real happy with this. I thought this fit right into that. And you're right. I mean, it's not technically a werewolf movie, and even I read Roger Ebert's review of it, which was very glowing. He thought it was about Indians who can exchange souls with wolves, and I very well could be. But and when I say Indians, I mean Native Americans, but they also refer to them as Indians in the movie too, and that's the classic term. And so I apologize if I offend anybody if I slip into that mode. But that's also part of the intentional fake out, though. The mystery are these werewolves? Like, there are these strong hints and some red herrings in there that there is actual werewolf shapeshifting going on. The Tom Noonan character is freaking bizarre. At first, I thought he was just like a zookeeper or a zoologist or something like that. But then he seems extremely fascinated with wolves. Like, that's kind of his focus of study. And that's probably why they go to him to examine, because they're finding all these bodies that have been mutilated, but mutilated like with precision, and bits of it that have been left behind happen to be diseased. So like, it's like whatever is killing and mutilating these people knows that they are like gonna die anyway or something like that. And they find hair on some of the bodies eventually. I don't know if this is true, because I would buy that maybe nowadays we have this degree of sensitivity in our medical equipment, but I can't believe back in 1981 that Gregory Hines' character's whole diatribe.
There's not a trace, not a speck of metal. You know how every piece of metal, no matter how sharp or smooth, will leave a residue when it cuts. Could be as finite as dust. Soft X-rays should pick it up. Nothing. And nothing softer could have ripped and ravaged like this.
Some plastic weapon.
Synthetics. I don't think there's any way I can check that.
Really?
I don't know. It seems far-fetched, but I don't know anything about forensics.
I thought I might be learning something here, or maybe it's just a bunch of bullshit.
It seemed to me like, and this is another thing that I felt like was a little bit misleading, because why wouldn't they just automatically assume it is an animal attack? It just is. Now, I understand like the precision of leaving behind certain organs. Okay, that's weird. But the wounds, it's claw wounds. And I don't understand why they don't get that right away. And I felt like it was a little misleading, because I felt like what they kept saying was it can't be an animal because it's too big.
It's too big or it's too smart. There was a degree of intelligence that was being attributed to it.
Okay.
In its selectivity of victims, that kind of thing.
And that's fair. I really liked that scene. I really, really liked Gregory Hines in this movie.
He was a highlight of the movie for me. Yeah,
he really was. He brought a little bit of levity to it. It was so serious.
Yeah.
Like this movie is so serious.
Well, and it's not like he was this like hilarious comedic character. He just brought a dose of like reality to it. Like, oh, here's a normal guy. Like a little jokey.
Right. Yeah.
Not staring off and brooding everywhere and saying cryptic things to each other, you know?
No, it wasn't even like he was like yucking it up. He wasn't. He was just acting normal and like being friendly and like and it was nice. And he's, oh gosh, you know, I was unaware that he passed away a long time ago.
I was too. I went and looked him up. I was like, why have I not seen him in anything lately? Let me go see what he's been doing. And I was like, holy shit.
I didn't investigate it further, so I don't know what happened, but like he was on Will and Grace and he looked young and healthy, and like that was his whole thing. Like he was super sexy and they were all super into him or whatever. And
yeah,
that was the last time I had seen him. And apparently he passed away, and I don't know how, but he was such an amazing talent. Like,
yeah,
that
really
man,
was.
Holy crap. Like, not only is he tall and handsome and could act, obviously, and like even in a role like this where he's totally secondary, he could be a totally forgettable character.
Mm-hmm.
And again, highlight of the movie for me. But he could also dance. Like,
yeah.
Listeners, if you have never seen Gregory Hines dance, like go to YouTube immediately.
Check it out.
Because like he's so talented and he just oozes charisma. It make you drool a little bit.
It's so true.
But anyway, I know that's off topic, but I saw that he passed away and I'm like, I'm so sad because he was so amazing. But yeah, I really enjoyed him in this movie, but I don't understand why it took them so long. And then they find the wolf hairs. Where do you want to go? There's a whole other character. There's a huge character that we haven't even introduced yet. They introduce for no good reason.
Yeah.
This woman, her name is Rebecca Neff, and she's played by Diane Venora. And I think they pulled her from stage work too, I think, if I remember correctly. And she's fine, but she's just an inconsequential character. It just feels like they have a male lead, so there has to be a romantic counterpart.
Right.
And I don't need a romance in this movie. It's dumb. And they have no chemistry at all.
No.
Because he looks like her dad.
He does.
And again, she's a lovely person. I don't like to judge people based on their looks, but she does not look like a starlet. She just looks like a normal person. So then we're just supposed to like be interested in this normal looking person.
Are we though?
Banging her dad.
I'm not sure. All right. So the banging bit really came out of left field for me because like you said, there was no chemistry. In fact, I wasn't even tapping a love interest angle here at all when I was watching it.
They just work together.
They just worked together. I saw that scene as more of just a thing that happened because they were both stressed. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't think the movie even was trying to push that, oh, these guys are now falling in love. I saw this again as more of this animalistic type thing. We're all people. We're part of nature, even though we've kind of tried to rise above it and take it over.
We all whoever is around when we get nervous.
Well,
okay.
Don't you? No. I'm not. You are twisting my words.
30 years.
You're twisting my words. No, I agree with you. I think that was weird. But like, okay, so we've got everybody here is troubled by something. Like this woman investigates, what is it? Like all over the world. She's supposed to be like an expert in all the horrible things that people do to each other all over the world or something. Like,
she's like the greatest psychologist in all the land or something. And so, God, it's so convoluted. Okay, it's so convoluted because that rich guy, it's all an investigation of who killed this rich guy.
Right.
Because he's like a Van der Veen or something, like, obviously a play on Vanderbilt. Like they're these rich people who are in control of shit or whatever. And they own security corporation called Executive Securities. So it appears to me that Executive Securities are investigating the murder, as are the cops. And are they working together?
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Well, she has this, and I think it's sort of referred to as her machine. So that's why I say she has this almost this laboratory where she claims she can kind of tell whether people are lying or not.
She has a fancy pants lie detector test. That's all it is.
It's like 4 different, technologies put together. It's thermal imaging to try to capture, changes in temperature in your face. It's a voice thing to try to capture tremors in your voice. They got something hooked up to her finger like a classic lie detector to monitor, the heart and all that stuff. And
right.
There are these very shadowy, almost evil, like surveillance style scenes, right? Where they have these people hooked up to this and they're talking to them and interviewing them. People who somehow they think might know something about this or be ancillary related. They have this initial notion. And this is it's like the chief of police is following this one lead, and then this guy and Gregory Hines' character are following the other lead.
Oh, right.
Where the police is like, these are terrorists. Because one woman says,
that's so stupid.
It was definitely a terrorist activity, like she knows. But they're like, no, the lie detector clearly shows she's lying. She doesn't know crap about this. So, again, I think all this makes sense in the sense that, again, we're setting up this whole, here is the future and here is modern day society. Here is a sort of New York under surveillance kind of thing. Oppression, surveillance, corporate controlled stuff. And then here is the grittiness of the reality of what some of that does, right? You have this urban blight. You have this whole area of the city that was once developed and is now a wasteland and nobody cares. And the exact opposite kind of people live there. And actually, I thought that the movie was very sensitive toward the people, for example, the bar that's on the edge of that in the Bronx where the Native Americans are, and the homeless people who are wandering around in the slums and amidst the ruins that surround this broken down church. And that is where all these attacks are happening. And these are the kinds of people that are getting killed until the rich people get killed. And now all of the efforts are going into trying to figure out who these rich people are, when actually there have been a whole bunch of people who nobody gave a shit about because they're homeless are being killed.
That's the whole thing. Like this Vander Veen guy or whatever was developing these rundown areas, and he's got like in his apartment or their headquarters or something, I don't know, there's like a model of this very modern development that they're going to put up there. And as it turns out, the wolves are protecting their territory,
like the last of the territory they have.
They don't want it developed because this is where they hunt.
Support for Two Guys and a Chainsaw during Werewolf Month is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below-the-waist grooming. Shaving your jewels doesn't have to be risky business anymore thanks to the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. This trimmer is all about keeping things smooth and safe so you can trim with confidence. Treat your boys down there and join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by going to manscaped.com to get 20% off free shipping with the code CHAINSAW. With Manscaped, it's easy grooming, no surprises. Get 20% off and free shipping with the code CHAINSAW at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with the code CHAINSAW at manscaped.com.
The question I was going to ask before I forget, we'll get back to it. I don't even remember how Albert Finney got turned on to the Native American aspect of it. I feel like he just kind of knew this guy, Eddie.
Yeah, well, he knew this guy, Eddie, and the woman raised some point, which I don't remember exactly what it was. Something about wolf attacks, and I don't know, somehow he got in this notion of Native Americans and shapeshifting into his head, because he basically climbs up the bridge to where Eddie is actually working on the bridge with all of his Native American friends.
Now, let me ask you a question, because you're the filmmaker. Did they shoot that on top of that bridge?
For sure they did. Yeah, those were not green screen shots at all. That was an accomplishment.
I know. I thought the same thing. I'm like, They are up there on that bridge, and that is pretty cool. Like, again, the cinematography, there are amazing shots of New York in 1980. Just amazing shots of 1980s New York. It's haunting, kind of.
Yeah.
But anyway, okay, continue. They're up on the bridge.
So they're up on the bridge, and he pretty much almost directly asks him, hey, you know, what can you tell me about shape-shifting werewolves? And he's like, well,
I can swim like a fish and I fuck like a bunny. I can shift with the best of them.
Shift?
Shape shift, we do it for kicks.
Oh, yeah?
Turn ourselves into a different animal. One night a salmon, next night a deer.
Or a wolf?
Sure.
and he unhooks Dewey's, Albert Finney's character, from his safety harness. Now, he's never had the safety on, actually, but he unhooks him from the safety harness and grabs his arm and says, see, you could fly like an eagle too. Just have a jump and see.
It's all in the mind. It's all in the mind.
Yeah, it is a tense scene. And so that's creepy.
It made me very nervous because I am terrified of heights. When he unhooked him, I'm like, oh my God, I couldn't handle it.
I mean, looking at the way it was shot and looking at it, knowing the time period, and, you know, like, I wouldn't doubt that they were up there for a little while without any safety harnesses on shooting this. That was freaky.
Oh, boy.
So anyway, that gets us in that mindset. Like I said, I think this whole wolf thing is an intentional fake out, right? Like, that gets us in this one mindset. Okay, well, now we're following the detective down this idea. Like, could these people, could there be werewolves? Could there be shapeshifters doing this?
And it's also not long after that Albert Finney follows Eddie. Like, he stakes him out. Like, there's a bar that apparently all of these Native American people, and they I don't know, they try to explain that Native Americans work in construction a lot or something.
Yeah.
But they all hang out in this one bar, and he stakes them out, and he and a couple of other guys come out, and then this older Native American man, they stop in the middle, like they just stop on the sidewalk. And this older Native American man gets in front of Edward James Olmos, puts a necklace on him, and says something.
And puts a piece of something under his. He was like a drug, right? Like in his gums.
Yeah, I didn't know what it was, and they never tell us what it was, but I assumed it was LSD or some natural hallucinogen or something like that. And so Albert Finney Dewey follows him to the beach, where Eddie goes under the pier, takes off all his clothes, and is naked for the next 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Naked.
Yeah.
I was surprised by that, too. And it's like, whatever. He's naked. He's fully naked. There's not a lot of, like, flopping wiener or anything. But
Edward James Olmos, not Albert Finney. This other guy is naked,
Yeah. That would have been a totally different story. But he takes off all of his clothes, and I'm like, yes, this is it. This is it. This is the moment.
Yeah.
And it teases it.
Oh, so bad.
He does stuff with his face. Like he like contorts his face in a way that a person could, but you think, oh, this is it. This is the precursor he's going to turn. But instead, he just runs around like a dog, laps up water out of the ocean.
Yeah. Well, out of a puddle.
A dog wouldn't drink water out of the ocean.
Out of a puddle on the...
I don't know, whatever. But he just runs around like a dog for a while, and then he sees Albert Finney watching him, and he starts running up to him like he's going to attack him.
It's creepy.
It is. And he faces him, and he like snarls and growls at him for a while. But then he just stands up like he just
punked him or something.
I don't even really understand what was happening. Like, he just resumes his humanity and stands up. And I couldn't tell if it was a like a gotcha moment because he says something like, see, I told you it was all in your head. And then the scene just cuts away, right? And that's it.
Yeah.
What a weird moment. And I didn't understand what we were supposed to learn from it.
Well, again, I think, okay, now this is probably a dead end, right? I think that's what he's learning about this, too. He's disappointed he didn't see this guy turn into a werewolf.
But was he just messing with him?
No, I don't really think so, because I think that a lot of traditional tribal religions that deal with nature. I also think of voodoo. Voodoo goes down this route as well, where people will channel spirits, often using drugs. They will, enter these trance-like states where they're supposed to be channeling spirits of animals, channeling spirits of the saints and things like that. And I think this was really nothing more than just another version of that happening that he witnessed and, conveniently.
I think you're right, but in that case, it feels a little trite. Like, just pretend to be a dog for 3 minutes.
But I don't think so, because there are actual... If you go into their bar, which he does later, there's wolf imagery on the walls. You see, old photographs of the Indians, the Native Americans wearing the wolf hides and things like that. And a couple of them, him and an older man there, go into a long diatribe, basically explaining the wolves and the Indians.
It's interesting.
It is.
It's not wolves. It's Wolfen. For 20,000 years, Wilson. 10 times your fucking Christian era. The skins and the wolves, the great hunting nations lived together. Nature in balance. Then the slaughter came. The smartest ones, they went underground. Into the new wilderness, your cities. Into the great slum areas, the graveyard of your fucking species.
These great hunters became your scavengers. Your garbage, your abandoned people became their new meat animal. Their own
animals? Are you sure, Wilson? They might be gods.
In their eyes, you are the savage.
You got your technology, but you lost. You lost your senses.
Thematically, it all connects, though. It's not random. It's not like, luck. They're aware. They know full well what's going on over here with these wolves.
Right.
And they feel a kinship with them.
Right.
And again, like I said, I think it's set up in the very beginning of the movie. Just as modern society or the white man has driven the Native Americans out of their land, out of their land where they were one with nature. I mean, he basically says this, right? So we all are driving nature out of its land,
right?
And this is the last bastion, and they don't want it to go. And that burned out church is kind of a symbol, it's like the last standing holy place. Even when they go in there, there's wolf imagery in pieces of the remaining stained glass and stuff like that. And again, this isn't supposed to be so literal. It's all metaphorical, but it's a place.
Sure.
I mean, yeah, it seems contrived because it's all to push forward this theme. But I liked it. I thought it was a beautiful piece of art because of that.
Yeah.
As the movie went on, all of that, at least for me, really coalesced into something a little more coherent, where I started to realize, okay, this is a little deeper and a little more complicated than just some people who can turn into wolves. And I thought the movie did a really good job of faking me out a little bit, leading me down that path, introducing some really odd characters. We haven't even talked much about Tom Noonan's character, but he, as the zoologist, is one night, watching these videos and making his audio notes about wolves, which
I hated that. I think that footage was real, and I hated it.
Yeah, of course it was real. Hunting, it was like wolf hunting footage
from a helicopter. Fuck you. I don't know. And for all I know, they may have been culling wolves for necessary purposes. I don't know, but it was really unsettling to watch those beautiful, gorgeous animals being shot and clearly in agony, because the ones that we saw, most of them didn't die immediately from the shot. They were just taken down, and you see them writhing and howling in agony, and oh God, it just made me sick.
At the same time, the wolf vision, has been going around, and it has come outside of his window, and you can hear that it's hearing what's going on in there. And then he seems to kind of sense or hear some howling or something outside. So he actually goes to the window and opens the window for no good reason, except possibly that it almost seems like he's like, if there's a wolf out there, I want him to see this, or I want him to kind of know what's happening. I feel like he was so fascinated by these animals, yet here he is watching these video, in the sort of science, again, how we dissect nature, right? As scientists, I'm sure that anybody who studies animals clearly respects them and loves them, or they probably wouldn't be into them, but not necessarily so, right? Science is full of a lot of like this kind of thing, shooting animals so that you can, dissect them. And he has stuffed wolves back in there, And so he almost seems to represent this sort of side of raping nature for even what we seem to think is possibly good intentions. But I think the movie was almost presenting him as having an unhealthy fascination, or his methods were unsound for which he needed to be punished.
I hadn't even considered that. In fact, I was confused why the wolves would kill him, because I got the impression that he respected nature. But now that you say, yeah, he does have all those stuffed wolves back there. He's basically watching wolf torture porn. Maybe Tom Noonan was miscast. Maybe this should have been a smarmier guy, because Tom Noonan is very soft and charming. Like,
yeah, he also has a slight, in his soft and charmingness, there's a slight creepiness to it, I think. There's a deliberateness to the way he delivers himself. It was really obvious in The House of the Devil, I thought, where you're like, this guy feels sinister, even though on its surface there's nothing but charm and niceness and almost meekness coming from this guy. Jonathan Pryce can come across that way too sometimes. He
is a little bit more sinister in my opinion. But okay, the things that I wanted to talk about, because we're getting close to time, the guy, Dewey and Rebecca, do lots of investigating. That is most of the movie, and we haven't talked about it at all. That's most of the movie. But there's one point where they go to that church, and I'm not even sure why they're there. But what I do know is they feel like they hear babies crying, or she does, or something. And that's a recurring thing that happens. What is that? Is that like a sound? Like, can wolves make a sound that sounds like human babies crying? Is that what was the suggestion?
I believe so. Not necessarily intentionally, but sometimes their howls resemble that.
Or they're mewling or whatever. Maybe resembles.
I'm not to take you off the point, but just to go back to the Tom Noonan thing, like, it's similar. I was confused why he called the fire department, and then he goes,
"What? I didn't understand that at all."
Again,
he reported a fake fire.
And then he leaves.
But I didn't know. I had no idea why.
He goes out to the park, right? Central Park, again, which is almost a nature preserve in the middle of the city, right? There are a number of scenes in this movie that take place there. But he goes out there and he stops and he listens, and you can hear the sound of the sirens almost meld and morph into the sounds of this wolf howling. And it seems to give him excitement. Metaphorically, it makes it sound like these two things are not that far off. Like the siren that we have now is similar to the cry of a wolf. Back then, it even almost sounds the same. That's how similar they are, right? And they serve similar purposes. Sound the alarm, sound danger and things. It almost seemed like he was setting that off, because he knew that if the wolves heard the sirens, maybe the wolves would then howl. And he had a sense that the wolves were out and they were there, because he actually makes that comment, I knew you would be here.
Okay.
Like a lure in a way.
Okay, gotcha. I did not catch that at all. I didn't know what was going on. And then he does hear them, and then he gets attacked off of his motorbike. Did you notice the next morning when it's after their bang session, the guy, Dewey, comes out of that girl's apartment, and like a homeless guy is like scooting along on Tom Noonan's motorcycle? Did you notice that?
Oh, was that his motorcycle? I wonder what that was.
It was Tom Noonan's motorcycle. Some homeless guy had just found it. It was like just scooting along on it. Thought that was hilarious.
I wondered.
But anyway, okay, so they're at this church, Dewey and Rebecca. She starts walking up. There's like a steeple, and there's like a stairway that you can walk up the steeple. And she starts walking up there, and we know that there's a wolf up there because we are seeing wolf vision watching her from that perspective. But all of a sudden, Dewey runs up there frantically and grabs her and races her out like he knows that there's a threat.
Mm-hmm.
But I didn't understand like what happened that alerted him that was something happening. And it's also interesting to me, this scene, because at this point, they still don't know what is going on.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't even know what it was that was up there, if anything. And they just run away and just go carry on with their day. Well, that was a weird thing that happened.
Yeah, I mean, it's a close call in a movie that's, trying to set up some suspense every now and then. I mean, I just thought
did I miss something? Was there something that alerted him that there was danger? Because it just seemed like all of a sudden he was like, ah! And he ran up and got her and they left.
But isn't that around the same moment where he is looking up and noticing all the wolf imagery around the church?
Maybe.
I wondered if that might be what kind of alerted him to it. And I really like that image. Like, this is their sacred place and it's in tatters and it's sort of their last refuge and the last thing they have to try to defend.
Then I feel like the next interesting scene is a lot happens. There's lots of business, but eventually Dewey and Gregory Hines go back and investigate that area also. And they're like staking it out from different buildings, but they're focused in on the church. And at some point, Dewey, gets impatient and just starts walking towards the church. But Gregory Hines gets attacked from above, and it was kind of exciting.
It was,
because he had a great big gun. At this point, we're actually starting to see the wolves, and they're wolves.
Yeah,
they are not any kind of creature effect, nothing. They are wolves. They used real wolves in this movie.
It's crazy.
I was also a little bit disturbed to hear that they had snipers in position at all times, and if the wolves got out of the contained area in which they were shooting, the snipers were told to shoot to kill because these wolves were too dangerous to escape. Oh boy, maybe don't use real wolves then. But I have to admit, they looked amazing.
Yeah.
And they were very scary.
Yeah. I mean, I kind of had a brand new appreciation for wolves, which, for a while now, I always just think of as like big dogs that are wild, but like in this movie, they're clearly not. They're clearly completely different creatures. They're snarling and they're scary and they're kind of magical.
And they're huge. You don't realize how big they are. Like, even in this movie, when they're on all fours, they're scary as heck, but they do just look like big dogs. But there is one scene, and I don't remember where it comes in the movie, where they're showing, I don't remember if it's the helicopter moment or not, but when they've hunted wolves, two grown men have to hold up the corpse of one between them, and it is as big as they are.
Yeah.
Like, they look smaller because they're on all fours, but if you pick them up, they are as big as a man.
It's nuts.
Yeah, it's scary, and it's very scary, and I feel like we need to get to the end. They kill Gregory Hines, which I was really upset about because he was my favorite character, but then Dewey gets attacked a little bit. I actually didn't really understand how he was as injured as he was, because it didn't really seem like he was I don't know, but anyway, he goes back to the Native American bar, and that's where they give him all of the exposition that we've already talked about, and that leads up to the end. And the end all kind of takes place, it's at that executive securities place.
Well, it's at it's at the apartment or whatever of the Vanderbeers, right? Kind of where they started their investigation. He comes back, but he sees it in a new light because it becomes very obvious to him, okay, it wasn't terrorists, it was the wolves, taking out the people who were threatening their territory. And this Vanderbeers, just a few days before, had attended a groundbreaking ceremony.
Right.
He had the shovel in there to break on this new development, of which they had that big white model inside the apartment.
Right. Okay. And so it's Dewey and Rebecca, and then also the executive, I guess, of this executive securities or whatever.
Yeah.
And they are trying to get out and go to a car. I don't really remember all the context. It doesn't matter.
Right.
But they're outside and they get surrounded by wolves.
Yeah. Dude,
great.
That was scary.
Looks fantastic. Love it, love it, love it. And they all stand still. And I feel like at this point, Dewey understands they're not just monsters, like, they're protecting their territory or whatever. And he's just trying to be cool. And he tells everybody to be cool. But the executive runs off and he gets his hand sliced off too. But he makes it to his car and he's trying to start his car. And then one of the wolves pops up in the back seat
like a classic horror moment.
Yeah, like Jennifer Tilly.
Yeah, like Jennifer Tilly.
But I loved it, and it looked great, and it was scary, and it was great. But then Dewey distracts the wolves by shooting the gas tank of that car, and it blows up. And so he and Rebecca run inside, and they run up to that room, which is on like the top floor
Right.
of a huge building. It's in that room with the big model of the development. And they're kind of just sitting around. And then I think it's Rebecca sees out the window, the wolves are all lined up outside the window. This is like a top floor building.
Yeah.
So this is a Salem's Lot moment where these wolves should not be able to be there, but they are, and they burst in. And this, again, it's like I'm flying through it, but it's all so great.
It is.
This is the best part of the movie.
Awesome, this scene.
And then the wolves are all in there in the apartment, and he has a gun, but he puts it down to show them, like, and like puts his hands up, like,
unloads it and everything. Yeah.
yeah, like, I don't want to hurt you. We're not trying to hurt you. And then I guess to communicate with them, he smashes and destroys that model of the development. Now, I read afterwards that was communicating to them that it was not going to happen. Like the development was over. It's not going to happen. What? Like, I don't know that he has the power to make that decision.
Well,
has that decision been made?
The way I interpreted it in the moment was he was just communicating to them that he was sort of anti-development. Like, I understand this is why you're doing your thing, and I don't agree with this either, so I'm going to tear it up so you'll spare me.
Fair enough. And they do. And then the cops bust in and start shooting. Who are they shooting at? Because it's not the wolves. The wolves disappear.
Well, the wolves disappear once they start shooting. I mean,
but then the cops never say anything about wolves.
well, he says, don't shoot, because he's trying to get them to not shoot the wolves.
Right, but he convinces them, the cops, that it was terrorists, right? Because he has to keep the wolves secret.
Right.
Like, the people can't know about it.
Yeah.
Now, and that's where the movie ends, basically, I think. But I'm still confused. And I feel like the message of the movie is a little muddy. Because I think that what we're supposed to believe is that these wolves should be left alone because they are just protecting the only last bit of territory that is available to them. And in truth, they're helping us out because they're really only feeding on people who are going to die anyway. And they're smart enough to not eat the diseased organs. People who are only going to die anyway, or undesirables who live in slums.
Is
that right?
I mean, you're not far off. When you make it that blunt, it does come across as a little bad, but I don't think that's the real reason. Again, I think this is just a high-end metaphor, right? Just for man and nature and man overtaking. I don't think the message is we need to leave wolves alone in cities,
No, they're not real wolves. They're not real wolves. They're a sacred, spiritual wolves.
Yeah.
And they're just cleaning up the bad parts of town, so leave them alone.
Because they have no choice.
Okay.
Because they have no choice. Yeah.
Fair enough.
By the way,
I don't know.
I thought the score for this movie was fantastic.
Amazing.
James
Loved
Horner, one of his early works, he only had 12 days to write and record it because they booted off the previous score. The score as much made the movie as the visuals, and as far as I'm concerned.
Yep.
And you can hear the theme for Aliens in there. That na kind of horn thing.
It sounded like Jaws to me sometimes. It had that kind of driving rhythm. And I know he didn't do Jaws. But...
No, well, it's that ethereal, like kind of echoing horn thing.
Yeah.
Oh,
kind of like da-da.
That's a little more pointed.
Regardless, I thought the score was very strong too.
Yeah.
And helped out because I didn't love this movie. I didn't hate it. I don't think it's a bad movie. I think that it's a fine movie. I felt a little duped. We're doing a werewolf month and I almost texted you. And was like, bro, it's not a werewolf movie. Just so you know.
I mean, I think we're throwing a wide net out. I mean, I disagree. I mean, of course, it's not a movie about people who transform into wolves, but I think it's definitely within the realm of this idea, of Yeah, it's not a werewolf movie.
lycanthropic stuff.
Lycanthropic stuff.
Sure.
Yeah, you know.
Fine. And it's fine. And, it's a well-made movie.
Mm-hmm.
There are parts of it that I really liked. The ending with the real wolves was like, wow, I love that. All of these great people who I've seen in other things and liked in other things. I enjoyed those parts of it. I wouldn't watch it again. I really was.
Yeah.
It felt long. It wasn't. It really felt long.
It's 2
it was
hours.
almost 2 hours.
Yeah. It did.
And it felt like it.
I feel like this is the kind of movie you're either in the mood for or you're not. You know,
Yeah,
it's
sure.
a very, very
And I'm
slow
not.
burn, but it's beautifully shot with a great score,
True.
fantastic characters
True.
in it, and it is peppered
Yep.
throughout with great moments, honestly.
True.
The cinematography is gorgeous. Like, the color palette is really interesting. You know, there are times when it almost feels black and white because it's so washed out. And those happen to be the moments when they're in the city and they're in the older part of the town. And it's just, you know, when you really start to break it down, you realize this is a very complicated film. It's a much more of a thinker than than any other movie we will probably do for the rest of our werewolf cycle.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Right. Of course.
And, you know, we talked about that, you know, The Howling was credited with taking werewolves out of the realm of cheese and giving them a little more punch and doing some interesting things with it. In a way, this movie that came out the same year managed to go in another slightly different direction, you know? And so
True.
for that, I like the fact that we did this, and I don't feel duped.
Okay, good. And I'm not disappointed that we did it. I think it's a movie worthy of talking about.
Yeah.
And I also think that it's really interesting that those 3 movies came out like in the same year.
Crazy, right?
It's wild. Anyway.
Yeah. 3 very interesting werewolf movies so far, all of them very unique in their own way, all of them in some ways very surprising in their own way. It's a shame we've already done A Company of Wolves, because that would also fall into this kind of like weird category, right? Where that was like a fairy tale and it a little nebulous at times about what was going on. I really liked that one.
It very much falls under the umbrella of what we're doing right now. If people are listening to this and enjoying it, you should listen to that episode, because that is a wild werewolf.
It is trippy and artsy and cool. And that was our Angela Lansbury tribute, wasn't it?
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you've enjoyed our werewolf cycle so far and you know some other friends who might be interested in it, go ahead and send this their way. That's one of the best things you can do. Another great thing you can do for us if you want to support the podcast is write a review for us somewhere else, or go ahead and think about joining our Patreon. We have a great set of goodies for patrons out there. They get to hear our unedited episodes. They get mini-sodes, written reviews, a lot of different things that we put out there. We've got a Christopher Pike book club that's going strong and turning out to be a blast.
I'm loving that.
It is fun. We might just keep going on that. So there's plenty of time to get it on that. Just go to patreon.com/chainsaw podcast. Until next time, I'm Todd.
And I'm Craig.
With 2 guys and a chainsaw.